The narrative begins in the year 1506, a period in which Yongjong, leading an army formed by rebels, staged a carefully planned revolt and managed to depose the king who occupied the throne at that moment. After assuming power, the new ruler set out to eliminate any form of opposition, brutally crushing all resistance and consolidating absolute dominance over the population of the kingdom. During this turbulent period, a terrible plague began to spread throughout the entire territory of Chosun, and the newly crowned king ordered the army to dispose of all contaminated individuals without any kind of mercy. Defenseless peasants were taken to a deep pit where they were mercilessly executed in mass without judgment or compassion. Amid the chaos, a desperate woman begs the soldiers to spare the life of her healthy daughter, but she is cruelly struck in the back by an arrow fired without hesitation. The young girl survives the attack and, in despair, tries to wake her mother lying on the ground. When the last agonizing screams cease and silence takes over the place, a man descends to the bottom of the pit and rescues the girl, taking her with him away from that scene of horror. As night falls and darkness covers the environment, a long and disturbing howl echoes from inside the pit, suggesting that something sinister remains in that place. 10 years pass since this traumatic event, and Yongjong begins to be informed about unsettling rumors spreading throughout the kingdom. The population starts to believe that monstrous creatures have appeared on the mountain where the extermination of the infected occurred, and that these beings have begun to attack innocent civilians, generating widespread panic and putting the king's authority at risk. Faced with this growing threat, he finds himself forced to consider drastic measures to contain the chaos. In an isolated region deep within the forest, a man named Yun lives alongside his friend Sung and his adopted daughter Myung, and the three try, without success, to obtain enough food to survive. The hunters, without luck, also fail when trying to fish and return home with nothing, further increasing the scarcity. Young insists that her father leave the remote village and move to a place closer to the palace, where there would be access to food and basic resources. But Yun repeatedly refuses the suggestion and instructs her to go to the garden to gather vegetables to prepare a simple soup. Meanwhile, a stranger silently invades the house's backyard and observes the interior through the window, raising suspicion. Upon noticing the presence of the intruder, Myung grabs her bow and points it at the man's back, demanding that he reveal his identity. The visitor, who introduces himself as her, claims to have been sent to find a former personal guard of the king. Confused, Myung does not understand who he is referring to, believing that her father is just a simple peasant with no connection to the court. At that moment, Sung approaches unexpectedly and, startled, the young woman fires an arrow that nearly hits him, narrowly missing. As they exchange glances, an immediate connection arises between them, marked by a subtle emotional tension. Young appears to understand the situation, and her reveals that he was sent by order of Yongjong to find him. Young is surprised to discover that both her father and Sung were in the past the most skilled guards of the king. Even so, Young makes it clear that he does not intend to return to his former role and orders her to leave immediately. However, the situation changes drastically when Yongjong arrives personally at the residence, causing everyone to bow in respect at his presence. During the meeting, the king recalls the events that occurred 10 years earlier when Yon appeared at the palace carrying the rescued girl, proving that she was not infected. At that moment, the former guard showed indignation at the senseless cruelty of the ruler and expressed deep disappointment with the extermination order, stating that the disease no longer existed and that the massacre was unjustified. Yongjong's soldiers immediately drew their swords to eliminate Yun, but Sung stood up to defend him, demonstrating loyalty. Even so, the king decided to spare their lives, choosing instead to banish Yun, Sung, and the child from Hangyan. Now, years later, Yongjong returns seeking Yungzul's help, reporting the emergence of a terrifying creature that has once again begun to spread disease and mutilate civilians throughout the kingdom. As a form of appeal, he returns the former guard's battle sword and asks him to defend Sheshong once more. After a long, sleepless night of reflection, Young decides to accept the call and returns to Hanyang accompanied by his companions. Meanwhile, shamans perform a ritual near the river in an attempt to purify the land and drive away the malignant entity, but they are brutally attacked, turning the waters into a blood-stained scene. The tragedy is witnessed by a small girl who manages to escape alive. Upon arriving at the capital, Yun and his family are surprised to find the city in ruins, where the population struggles desperately to survive amid decay. They reunite with her, who leads them to the scene of a new crime, where the bodies of shamans and merchants are found with limbs violently torn off. Young carefully examines the corpses and identifies rope marks on the victims' ankles, raising suspicion. Determined to understand what happened, he decides to interrogate the young witness, who reports having seen something unusual, although she does not show fear in her voice. Yun and Sung decide to follow her to uncover more details, and during the journey they observe a hooded man delivering a bag to the girl before fleeing hastily. Sung tries to pursue him, but the suspect escapes on horseback. Yun reaches the witness at a simple house, where she distributes food from the bag to other starving children. The young girl admits that she lied about what happened at the river in exchange for food, revealing the severity of the famine affecting the population due to rumors about the monster, which have driven people away from trade and work. Although she has not seen the creature directly, she firmly believes in its existence. Later, another severely injured man arrives at the village on the verge of death due to a new attack that occurred in the mountains. Yun and Sung head to the location and find even more disturbing evidence, such as knife marks and strange blisters on the victims' bodies. One detail draws attention when they notice that one of the corpses is stuck high in a tree, something impossible for a normal human being to accomplish. After analyzing all the gathered evidence, Yun returns to the king and presents his conclusion, stating with conviction that all those men were in fact attacked by another man. It becomes evident that someone deliberately manipulated the situation by using knives to stage attacks and make it appear that a monstrous creature was responsible for the deaths. Even so, all the victims showed clear signs of infection by an unknown and highly aggressive disease. In an improvised experiment, a rat used as a test subject, after coming into direct contact with the contaminated bodies, quickly begins to develop wounds all over its body and dies within a few hours, proving the lethal nature of the illness. Yun remains determined to discover who or what is truly behind those disturbing events. Faced with growing tension, Youngjong orders the formation of a search team, placing Yun in command of the mission with the objective of locating and eliminating the supposed monster. The authorities agree to provide only 100 soldiers for the operation and determine that the rest of the group be formed by volunteers among the peasants. Guards begin to recruit men by force, leaving only women and children behind in the capital. Among the assembled volunteers, Yun reluctantly notices that his adopted daughter is present disguised as a soldier. The captain demands that she remain in the city, but the young woman refuses to obey, and after insistence, manages to convince him to allow her participation. To the sound of a gong, the group begins the journey toward the mountains and conducts a complete sweep of the region. However, they find nothing except a strange pinkish slime dripping from the branches of the trees, without any other concrete evidence. Sung suggests ending the search and returning before nightfall. But the commander of the royal army, Jin, insists on continuing, claiming that the creature usually comes out to hunt at night. Young, uneasy, tells her father that she has not found a single human bone along the way, which may indicate that the supposed creature is starving. Even in the face of this concern, Yun orders the group to split up and continue investigating. Meanwhile, the king speaks with his advisor and expresses conviction that, at the end of the search, it will be proven that the monster does not exist, allowing the restoration of the population's trust in the authorities. He firmly believes that all the attacks were orchestrated by someone with hidden intentions. As night approaches, the group faces its first difficulties when an elderly volunteer gets lost and heads in the opposite direction. While trying to find him, Sung reaches a cliff and is shocked to notice recent traces of a red fluid spread across the place. Shortly after, Yun, Myung, and Her also arrive at the point, and the young woman feels a strange familiarity with that place, as if she had seen it before. Sung calls the others and shows the mark of a huge paw imprinted on the ground, reinforcing the idea that something gigantic passed through there. While the volunteers gather, Yun orders them to continue the search in the region of the pit. At the same time, Jin reveals his true intentions by ordering his soldiers to eliminate all the peasant volunteers. After committing the massacre, he orders part of the troops to return to the palace. Yun's group sees a signal fire in the sky, interpreting it as an indication that the monster had been found. Moments later, arrows begin to strike the volunteers, and Jin's soldiers initiate a brutal massacre against the remaining peasants. He confronts the guards and manages to save Myung from a fatal blow. At the end of the attack, only Yun, Sung, He, and Myung remain alive, surrounded by dozens of armed soldiers. Suddenly, an arrow is fired at Yun, but Sung steps in front to protect him, suffering only a light wound to the arm before being captured. The four are tied together, and Jin arrogantly reveals that the monster never existed. According to him, the army itself has been deliberately exterminating peasants to keep the people dominated by fear. He recalls that 10 years earlier, the population also easily believed in the existence of a plague, which allowed Yeongjong's rise to power. Upon hearing this, Young relives painful memories of her childhood and tries to free herself from the ropes in a burst of rage. Jin, indifferent, pushes the young woman along with her into the pit, but both manage to survive by holding onto a rope. Enraged, Young promises revenge against those who hurt his daughter, but he is struck in the head before acting. Jin then orders the guards to eliminate the remaining survivors, simulating another monster attack. He and Myung manage to dodge the arrows, but suddenly a heavy breathing echoes from the depths of the pit, followed by the emergence of a huge clawed paw. Within seconds, the creature fully emerges, climbing the cliff and killing one of the soldiers. The guards come face to face with a monstrous being covered in open wounds and grotesque blisters. Terrified, Jin orders them to fire, but the monster shows no fear of arrows and advances rapidly, tearing the soldiers apart with extreme violence. While the creature eliminates the enemies, Sung and Yun manage to free themselves and descend into the pit. Fortunately, Young and He survived the initial confrontation. Around them, they find numerous bodies covered in blisters, evidencing the contagious nature of the creature. Yun states that they must return immediately to report everything to the king before the threat reaches the capital. However, the monster decides to return to the interior of the pit. At that moment, the old man who had previously disappeared reappears, coming out of a cave, and instructs the group to cover their bodies with the creature's slime to mask human scent and avoid infection. He extinguishes all the torches and instructs everyone to remain in absolute silence, explaining that the monster does not see well but reacts to sounds and movements. The creature returns to the pit and approaches Myung dangerously, but thanks to the old man's instructions, it does not notice their presence. While chewing remains of human flesh, the monster spits a liquid directly onto the young woman's face before finally falling asleep. Taking advantage of the opportunity, the group tries to hide in a nearby cave, but at the last moment the creature detects the human odor coming from Young and begins a fierce pursuit. The group runs through the complex labyrinth of underground tunnels, narrowly escaping being devoured. The escape leads them to a cliff where, with no alternatives, they are forced to jump into the water to survive. Meanwhile, Jin and several other guards manage to return to the palace alive. He informs Prime Minister Sim that the creature does indeed exist. It becomes evident that throughout that period, he was the one behind the violent crimes and also responsible for inventing the existence of the monster. Taking advantage of collective fear, he manipulated all of King Jeongjong's decisions. Now that the creature has proven real, Sim begins to fear that the population will turn against the government. He orders the soldiers to set the city on fire to contain any kind of resistance. With this action, he intends to exploit the weakness of the current king and seize the throne. Several men from the search group, with their bodies covered in ulcerated growths, return to the capital. The population panics at the fear of contagion, and the soldiers begin setting houses on fire with residents still inside. Meanwhile, the old man leads the group to a secret passage that allows access to the palace. In the castle's underground, the group finds a chamber filled with enormous cages. The old man explains that the former ruler of Chosun had a great fascination with monsters and maintained an exclusive area in the castle dedicated to these creatures. When he was younger, he was responsible for feeding them and ended up developing affection for one of them. When Yeongjong deposed the former king, He ordered that all dangerous monsters be exterminated. The servant then helped his small creature escape through a secret passage. Later, after eliminating the infected in the pit, he ended up consuming a body contaminated by the plague, transforming into a cruel and merciless creature. The monster invades the secret passage, and the old man instructs the group to go up. Using a toy, he lures the creature into an enclosure and locks himself in with it. The monster casts a look full of hatred and tears him apart mercilessly. It then easily frees itself from the cage and goes after the others. Meanwhile, the Prime Minister addresses the people and promises to take care of the injured and provide shelter to those who lost their homes in the fire. The population, naive, thanks Sim, believing that he is protecting everyone from a new plague. Young's group finally reaches the king's chambers. He states that the monster is real and that it was created within the very walls of the castle. At that moment, Sim invades the place with his armed guards and wounds Jungjong. The rebels take control and eliminate the royal guards. Sim's soldiers capture Yun's group. The Prime Minister plans to announce to the people that Yun was responsible for ordering the burning of the capital. Since trust in the king has already been shaken, it will not be difficult to remove him from power. Sim orders the execution of the prisoners. However, at that moment, the monster emerges from the underground. The soldiers try to face it, but they are easily defeated by the creature. Meanwhile, in the courtyard, Myung pretends to suffer from intense itching, and the others follow the act. By distracting the guards, they manage to discreetly free themselves from the bindings and defeat their enemies. Taking advantage of the chaos, Jungjong and Yun also escape. Sim summons all the guards of the kingdom to fight the monster. At a certain moment, the creature is restrained with giant ropes. The king is found by his loyal servants, and Yun orders them to hide him in a safe place. Sim orders the monster to be taken outside the castle to be publicly destroyed before the crowd. However, the creature violently breaks free, spreading its red fluid over the guards, who immediately fall ill, becoming feverish and covered in wounds. The Prime Minister and several soldiers flee in despair. When the protagonists arrive at the location, they decide to prepare a trap in a cell in the underground. Despite protests, Yun decides to serve as live bait to capture the monster. Meanwhile, the palace is invaded by residents seeking to escape the contamination that has taken over their homes. Myung informs them about the presence of the creature in the castle and encourages everyone to help prevent it from leaving toward the village. She also reveals that Sim was responsible for the fire and the destruction of their families. Armed with pitchforks, the enraged population drags the Prime Minister into the castle and locks the gates, abandoning him to the monster. Yun fires flares into the sky, attracting the creature. At the same time, Sung and Her prepare explosive barrels in the underground. Jin, covered in wounds, appears before them, determined to take revenge. An intense confrontation begins, and Her manages to pierce him with his sword. Even so, Jin refuses to give up and prevents the weapon from being removed. Myung runs to the location and aims an arrow at him, but Jin uses Her as a shield. The young woman asks the man to repeat what he did in their first encounter. Jin's body falls to the ground, and Yun enters the underground, pursued by the monster. The group lights the fuse and quickly flees to the top. Before leaving, Yun realizes that the flames have gone out. He pushes his friend out and asks him to take care of Myung. The warrior locks himself in with the creature and throws the torch at the explosives. A massive explosion occurs, causing the castle to tremble. Upon realizing that her father remained in the underground, Myung falls into despair. Dawn arrives, and the rain washes the bodies of the victims. The monster is defeated, and the people open the castle gates. Myung desperately searches through the rubble until she hears breathing beneath the boards and finds Yun still alive. The villagers help remove the debris and rescue the warrior. The young woman, overwhelmed with joy, reunites with her adoptive father while everyone celebrates the victory. At the end of the story, Myung remains at the palace alongside Her. Her father and her friend decide to return home and resume their lives. During the journey, Sung questions Yun about how he managed to survive, and it is revealed that at the last moment before the explosion, he tied his own body to a rope and managed to climb up to save himself.